we know what you are.
Yes,
and if you live in Hollywood, likewise, if you choose to walk around in a Confederate flag and you live in Hollywood, you wouldn't get the benefit of the doubt, and frankly, I would think you're too dumb to deserve it, right? But the question would be asked, are you some kind of, are you a neo-Confederate, or what's the deal here, right?
Yeah.
And there would be no discussion about whether or not you're aware of what the connection is. I know what the connection is. Explain yourself, and then we'll fire you anyway.
So 2 other points I want to make. One is, of all the things to try to paint a new, because it's clear they're gunning for it now. Of all the things to try to paint a new interpretation on, the Confederate flag was an easy one, because even though literally up until 5 years ago it was not universally recognized as one symbol, there was a lot to work with there. Let's put it that way.
The connection wasn't totally spurious.
Yes. Whereas here, of all the symbols in the world, see, the Confederate flag, the Gadsden flag is more or less a libertarian symbol. And you can tell that because it's not very subtle.
Mm-hmm.
Libertarian's not quite that great at subtlety. It's not there.
In typical libertarian fashion, it's not enough to use symbolism. You have to also
put words on the damn thing. So it's not only is it a coiled rattlesnake, which that alone, if it was just that, you'd still say the symbolism's pretty obvious. It's saying, like a rattlesnake, I'm deadly, but I will warn you to not fuck with me. Just in case there was any room for misinterpretation, they put right under it, don't tread on me.
Not even in Latin either. Not in Latin, not in Greek.
In plain English, what does this flag mean, you might ask? Oh, well, luckily, libertarians, being who they are, explained it in words, because they love words. There's no room for interpretation. There's no, well, some people think it means this and some people think it means that. It means exactly what it says it means. It means, don't tread on me. Don't tread on me. That's all it means. That's all it means, period. That's it. So it's just ridiculous that they're going to try to recast this, which, by the way, if you're going to do that, because I saw in the Yahoo article, they have a picture that allegedly is a real picture of a giant group of people, and they got a bunch of flags, and one of them is that, and other ones are bad. The American flag was flown at every single official KKK event that was ever held in the United States. They flew an American flag. They used the Christian cross as one of their symbols, quite famously, I believe. And nobody's saying that if you wear a cross necklace, well, everyone knows that's a KKK symbol. Is that supposed to be a burning cross? Everyone knows, oh no, you're talking about Jesus Christ of Nazareth, that guy. You're not talking about Cletus Bumfuck of the Grand Dragon of the KKK.
First of all, Dan, you're wrong on both counts. The T stands for time to get out of town.
Sorry, my mistake. But the other thing I want to say is we had this talk earlier about, in a previous installment, about that awful goddamn communist painting that the left is now taking down because they can't stand it. A big kerfuffle that already passed about a painting, a mural of George Washington at some school that included him stepping over a dead Indian, Native American, and it's being taken down because it was racist and sexist and homophobic and white male, cis male, patriarchal, capitalist evil. Even though it was painted in the 1930s with FDR slush fund money, also known as the WPA, by a communist Russian who painted it to say to the American people that your history is racist and awful. And now the new left can't handle it because even showing racism to condemn it is itself racist. But anyway, the point being, whether it's this or Confederate monuments or whatever, it's important to remember that it's always just the pretext. And even if you say, oh, well, I do agree that it's important for people to, we're libertarians, we're ANCAPs, we don't care about, oh no, are people in the country going to lose respect for George Washington? Is it possible that they won't admire Robert E. Lee as much as they used to? We don't care about that shit, right? But the point is, when they get Robert E. Lee, and then they get the next one, and they'll go after Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, and this one, and that one, and the next domino. Eventually, one of the dominoes that fall, they're coming for us. And now they've already gone for libertarian symbols and cultural artifacts. And that's why you can't let it happen. Because you don't want to end up like Winston Smith in that room in 1984 with Brian telling you, if you want a picture of the future of the human race, picture the ANCAP smiley ball with a frowny face and his thumb down forever. So we have to stand up, we gotta create like an online store or something so they can buy their Gadsden flag straight from us and we can pocket the profits.
Yes.
Support the moral minority.
All right. Speaking of things that aren't woke, apparently the moon landings. We're not even going to read these articles. We're going to talk about these articles. The New York Times and the Washington Post ran multiple articles seemingly on the same day. No. Okay, the Washington Post one was actually from a month ago. But it doesn't matter. They're all relevant now. The New York Times ran articles about how the Soviets won the space race for equality and how there weren't enough women astronauts at NASA during the moon landing. But I could swear to God, there was a movie. I'm pretty sure, and this isn't me being like sarcastic or anything, like, wasn't there a whole movie about these 3 black chicks who like helped do the calculations of the moon landing? Like, haven't we already retread this ground? Like, generally with these kinds of events, you can either criticize it for not having enough women of color or people of color. You can sort of awkwardly insert people of color, or you can just find people of color that were already there and bring them straight to the front of the photograph, so to speak. So
I just clicked on the Washington Post story about how there's not enough, diversity and there's no women and all that. And I can't read it, of course, because as we've talked about before at the Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness, but if you want to see any of it, you have to pay us money.
Mm-hmm. Or you very capitalist, I have to admit.
Yeah. Isn't that hilarious? How that's like, they're like this institution that is like a parody of what Ancapistan would be like. I can read the headline, but if I want to read on, I have to send them $1 right now.
I mean, really charging people money to learn about the failure of democracy. I mean, you couldn't get more hoppe if you tried.
Yeah. But anyway, so I can't read the article, so I don't know.
It doesn't matter. You don't need to read the article.
Is a lady sitting at the command, desk with 2 guys. So she's right there. I mean, I don't know what we're complaining about. She wasn't handing them a sandwich. She had a headset on and she looked like she was doing, real work.
Yeah.
I assume it was some sort of a stage photo op.
No.
Like maybe it was bring your wife to work day or something. Oh, I'm not saying that sexistly. We all know how NASA scientists are sexist. They're the butt of the joke here.
If I can just, sort of flex my brain muscle for a little bit. So back in those days, for like routine calculations, actually women would do that. If you had a whole lot of equations,
they're like, hey, baby, what's 2 + 3?
Oh, Jesus, Dan. Yeah.
This so if you NASA scientists I'm quoting.
Listen, according to Ilhan Omar,
I'm not talking about, the female NASA. I'm talking about the male NASA scientists who should be condemned totally
for their sexism and in expecting women to do math. Basically, what the women were doing during these times was, if you had sort of long calculations that needed to be done, but they were, simple in the sense that you weren't needing to figure things out. You just needed to punch in all the numbers and go through it by hand. Men wouldn't do that. That was apparently women's work. So that would be what all these women were doing. And they did do, like, it was an integral job until we replaced them with calculators, much in the same way that we replaced secretaries with cell phones, right? Women are the first victims of automation, it seems. And so, if we've already done that, we already made the movie about how important all these women of color were, you can't turn around and then say they weren't there. I want a refund on that movie.
Did you really go see it?
No, of course I didn't.
Yeah, okay.
But if I had seen it, I'd want a refund. We've already made the moon landing, instead of the, Nazi German achievement that it really was, thank you, Dr. Werner von Braun. Instead, we've made it into an achievement of proud women of color. And then now we're turning around and we've revised it. It's actually, the moon landing was sexist and racist. It's a double revision. It doesn't work.
How many women have been on the moon?
None, I would assume.
How many? Exactly, Marcel. You should be ashamed of yourself.
It's funny. I actually had to pause and think about it because I know there have been like a solid amount of female astronauts. I'm like, none of those broads have been to the moon, right? Nah.
Broads on the moon. That sounds like one of like B movies from the 70s.
It sounds like some kind of movie from the 70s.
So the point being here is because we are, at the Moral Minority, we are, of course, a progressive podcast free of hate.
Right.
This is our opportunity as progressives who believe in equality for women to shame NASA and call for its abolition. Defund NASA.
Yes.
Defund all sexist government programs.
Alternatively, we can spend some money and put some feminists on the moon.
I think that should be a two-pronged strategy.
We send them to the moon, and once they're there, then we defund NASA.
Yes, exactly. So it's almost like the last thing that you do before you turn the lights off at NASA headquarters is you send that rocket of all the feminists to the moon so that they can conquer it for people kind.
Exactly.
And there'll be no war on the moon.
Exactly.
Because women will be in charge. And I would say the Earth will be a better place for it. Wouldn't you?
Yeah, we will look at their shining example.
Exactly.
Babylon Bee also just put out a nice article talking about how the New York Times praised the Soviet Union for unprecedented gender equality in the labor camps.
I gotta say, this one fooled me.
Yes. It really is something because,
if
it's
you look
one
at the fake photo of the New York Times with how the Soviets achieved gender equality in the Gulag, subheadline, from prison guards to prisoners, and the Soviets were decades ahead of the U.S. in the gender equality.
Yeah, that picture really is like quality.
At their brutal labor camps. Because the way it phrases it, when I just saw the picture, I totally believe that was real, because that sounds like something they'd say.
It fits the New York Times style guide.
Yes.
Yes.
The idea that they would be like, we're not saying the brutal, they call them brutal camps, but it's like they're saying, isn't it interesting, though, how at least on this one aspect, they were ahead of us? That sounds like an article that's going to exist in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
Babylon Bee, you got me. Speaking of things that you can't believe you read in the news.
Jeff Epstein?
Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Any one of those will work, actually. That's the great thing about the clown room.
Yeah, this is really the big section.
Anything can transition.
Yeah. Oh, speaking of transitioning, but just
go ahead.
No, we're going to do Epstein first. We're going to talk about Epstein.
You fooled me. Speaking of being gullible.
Yeah, speaking of being gullible, let's talk about Jeffrey Epstein. Really just talk about the fact that apparently nobody's talking about Jeffrey Epstein. I know some
Funny
people
how that works, huh?
Yeah. Some people in our circles were saying that the Area 51 raid meme, it was like a distraction or something.
False.
Right? No, the timing.
I debunked that.
Yes, our co-host Dan debunked the idea in typical Snopes style by showing that even though these two things happened at the same time, they were in fact unconnected, and your feelings of suspicion are wrong. No, but actually, if you look at just the Google search
Trends.
Intensity, I mean, somehow nobody was really Googling Jeffrey Epstein. That's also interesting. But the searches were already going down before the Area 51 thing took off.
Yeah. It seems more likely that the people who got into it was a genuine meme that took off.
Yeah.
Especially because, I don't think they plan ahead that well. I don't think they're that good at creating memes, but just the timing of it doesn't make sense. It was not the case that the Jeffrey Epstein interest was hitting a boiling point and then suddenly, like a release valve, everyone is channeled off into this Area 51 thing. If you just go to Google Trends and search although maybe they edited the trends lines, but who knows? It appears that nobody gave a fuck, because why would they, really? The people who know about it are the tinfoil hat people who are not Googling Jeffrey Epstein, because we already know who the fuck he is. I just lumped myself in with the tinfoil hat people. And the people who don't give a fuck, they are exactly the kind of people who are not going to be looking that shit up. They're going to be going, oh, cool, what's the hot new meme about, oh, LOL, we're going to get aliens out of Area 51.
Clapping alien cheeks.
Yeah, exactly. Clapping alien cheeks at Area 51. Someone who did talk about Jeffrey Epstein, Eric Margolis, I don't know. He is a foreign policy writer, writes frequently for Anti-War and Lou Rockwell. He wrote a great article about when he was invited to Jeffrey Epstein's house that raised an interesting point, which was that within, I think he said basically immediately, right?
Something like pretty much as soon as he walked in the door.
Yeah, that as soon as he walked in the door, this is the East 71st Street residence of Jeffrey Epstein in New York City. said to be the largest private home in New York City. He said as soon as he walked in, a butler asked him